Hello, here's another episode of the Purpose Playbook. We've pretty much done a whole podcast episode before I've even hit record, and I just hit record quickly so we could crack on. But we can't really say the same thing twice. This is Charlotte Steele. So I interviewed Charlotte from another podcast, one of many, which Brian will probably say, and I made a big decision last year to not proceed with that podcast because that was really all about sort of business growth, and it was quite commercially focused. And as many people know who listen to me now, the purpose is real, and I want to make sure that everything I do feeds into the children's sector in some way, alongside my good pal Brian. So we decided to bring Charlotte back on, and I'll do an intro, but a little anecdote. When I got off air in the last podcast, I spoke to Charlotte about my plans, and they really were just plans. I mean, that week I'd sat down and drawn this diagram of what I thought we should do with our lives, and I had a big chat with Brian, who'd been a bit of a heart to heart, as he likes to say, and I think he sort of takes a lot of credit for everything that goes forward because he thinks he started all of this by having a conversation with me, but really it's my brain. But anyway, I sketched all this out and I talked it through with Charlotte, and the first thing she said was, well, here's how I can help. And she sort of reeled off 3 different ways. And I just found it so inspiring at the time because you're a bit uncertain with what you want to do. And then someone says, yeah, I get it. Here's how we can do it. And then I had another couple of conversations after that and people said similar stuff. And I thought, we're onto something here. But anyway, so I thought, I know that Charlotte is like packed with purpose, and that's really what we're about, is talking to people about purpose and good people doing good things, and she comes with bucket loads of that. So 15 years of experience working with entrepreneurs, focusing on confidence, resilience, and creating meaningful impact. Even delivered a TED talk, which I'm very jealous of because it's on my bucket list to do one at one stage in my life. I think you're launching your own platform, gearing up for the Thriving Startup podcast. But at your core, I guess it's all around helping others and sort of helping others to sort of take control and live their purpose and have a better life. So it ties so nicely in with where we're at. So sorry for the ramble, but yeah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here again. It's exciting,
Nice.
isn't it?
Oh, 100%. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and sort of how you got to where you got to now?
Well, if we keep it in the realms of helping people, I've been helping people since the age of 8. So when all the crisis was going on in Kosovo, I was 8 years old watching the BBC News at the time. And I just thought, my God, this is just awful. What is happening to all these people? And I immediately thought, what can I do to help? And I started a food can drive around my village, so where I lived as a kid. And I spent quite a bit of time just knocking on doors with this cart and asked people for donations of food. And I said, this is to help the refugees from Kosovo. We need to do all we can to help. And it's just been something within me that you just can't shift it. Like, once you've reaped the rewards and seen the benefits of making a difference, even if it's to one person, it's addictive. It's like a drug that you cannot shift. And if you can gear yourself into a scenario where you can just keep building and moving around to help as many people as you possibly can, I mean, just you sleep very well at night.
That's so young, by the way, 8.
Yeah.
Most kids are playing Mega Drives and PlayStations at that
I was
age.
still playing Kirby in between, but there was
Great game.
8. I remember I was sat in the kitchen whilst eating my tea, thinking that is awful. Like, what can we do? Because if no one does anything, then these poor people, they can't eat.
Yeah.
So there
that
we
is
go.
crazy. So what? So obviously you're. How would you define your purpose in life?
My purpose is to help people to make them more confident and to not fear things. So, you mentioned my TED Talk. My TED Talk was titled "How the Power of Truth Can Change Your Life," and the response was quite, "Oh, you must be very religious to say things like that." No, this is just, you can't fear truth because truth gives you direction in life. But so many of us fear it in different quantities and things like that. But if you're an honest person and if you are led by truth, then your life is more simple. There's
So can
a
you?
better peace.
Oh,
Me and Rich were talking this morning about sort of the environment you grow up in, and obviously
Yeah,
at 8 years old, you meet a lot of great 8-year-olds, right? But
yeah.
you don't meet a lot of great 8-year-olds that go out and want to help refugees, right? So did you have people around you who were inspiring, and as you've grown up, have you had mentors around you that have helped you on this journey?
Well, I'm very lucky in terms of my family environment, like my parents and aunties and uncles. That they're wonderful people. But when I was young, my dad's mom, so my nan, unfortunately had Parkinson's disease, and she lived in her own property. So our life at that particular time was filled with, right, okay, the logistics need to be to keep what we need to do to help my nan involved. And there's one particular time where we were called to her house. She'd rang the emergency button, and she'd left the key in the front door. So we couldn't get in to help her. We knew that she'd fallen over. She was on the floor. She couldn't move. So we had to feed my brother through the kitchen window, who was 2.5 at that time, as part of the rescue mission, to feed him into like the small window, to get him in, to feed him into the kitchen so we could go in. And then we were explaining to him, you turn the key this way to let us in. So I think the early exposure to looking after somebody who was in desperate need certainly helped. And my parents were always very willing to help, my nan at that point. And I think if I look back to my childhood, my mum was very vocal of when somebody was in a misfortunate situation. She would evoke a lot of empathy, and she was very clear, and she would explain the reasons, why that person's feeling that way, what the potential factors were that led that person to feeling that way. And it applied like a level of emotional critical thinking for me from a very young age. So I can speak to people, and have done for many years, and if they're sharing a story that's very raw and vulnerable, it's almost like I'll let my guard down and I'll ease into what that must be like for them, to have a greater understanding.
Yeah.
Side note, I've got a mental image of us feeding my 3-year-old Reagan into a window and what would happen next. He's never even in the door, is it? Mate,
He'd be looking out the door, not letting you in.
He'd be in the cupboards. He'd be looking for chocolate. Anyway,
So like you mentioned there, like empathy is quite a big word that comes around leadership, right? So
Yeah.
how have you, Rich has told me a lot about you and what you do and who you work with. How that empathy, I struggle with empathy because I'm probably too nice at times.
Yeah.
In a corporate world that you work in with different businesses, how do you use that empathy well, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So if I'm working with clients, I try and provide a very safe space so that they can be honest with me about certain things. I'll be gentle with them to remind them that they can be honest. I'm not going to judge them for anything. I'm not going to start lambasting them for any decision that they've made. So that they can share the challenges. We can get to the core of what the cold hard facts are of what pain points they have. And because I've run businesses previously, I've worked with businesses from the ground up, and I've been part of that senior leadership team and have experienced those typical challenges and pain points firsthand. So therefore I can provide the empathy, because I can go back into my repertoire and my arsenal of all those experiences and think, right, okay, I remember how I felt at that point. I remember the sleepless nights that I had then. I remember thinking, oh my God, how on earth are we going to solve this particular problem? So I can then say to them, well, you're in good company because I've gone through this. I can empathise with you because I've experienced it myself.
Yeah. I think we did a networking event recently, and we spoke on stage, and one of the biggest things that came out of that event is we spoke to them about the mistakes we've made,
Yeah.
and how we would change it doing it again and moving forward. And it was one of the things that really resonated with people.
Yeah.
They were like, people don't normally stand up
No.
and tell us they've done things wrong, but
They normally tell the success story, right? And all this
yeah.
we were like, here's all the way the mistakes we made,
Yeah.
and here's all the things we would advise against doing. And yeah, it went down really well.
It humanises it more, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think
Because
that's
we're not robots, you know. We don't wake up one day and execute the perfect life that day. It's just not possible.
no, it
So
isn't.
tell us. One of the things that actually changed my life was watching a TED talk.
Really?
I watched a TED talk on a lady called Rita Pearson,
Yeah.
and she talks about that every child deserves a champion, genuinely.
Oh,
And I had an epiphany that day, and I sat in this meeting. I was on a course, and I watched this TED talks, and it was like a 7 or 8 minute TED talk, and it was around how young people need a champion, somebody in their life, and it literally changed my whole course in life. Right?
Yeah.
So tell us, like when I read that on your forum, I was like, that's amazing, incredible. So tell us how that came about,
Yeah.
and you spoke a little bit about what it was about, but tell us more about how it was on the day and how you felt.
I mean, it will be in my top 10 memories for a very long time. It will take, you know, something very special to beat that. One of the biggest takeaways that I had from that day was, my God, the appreciation of the effort that goes on behind the scenes from the team, because they're all volunteers and they all come together. And I was very overwhelmed and moved by the passion, and you are surrounded by people who want you to win. They're there because they want what you have to say to go wider and to make a difference. So they share your mission of why you're doing it in the first place. It was wonderful. I felt so lucky and so fortunate to be given that opportunity. But the talk itself was inspired by my granddad, who died a few years ago, and he was obsessed with constantly telling us, never be afraid of what the truth is, never be afraid of what the truth is. And you know, we all go through different chapters in life, and if you read that or hear that, never be afraid of what the truth is, oh, you know, yeah, but if I do acknowledge it, then it'll cause this pain, or it'll cause this domino effect, or I'm not quite ready for that yet. So my talk was about what you can do with truth. So what happens afterwards? So you've got three options. You can either be content with what's happened, so you can stand still and just reflect on, right, I've done a good job, that's great, or I've learned from what that is, I know what to do next time. The second one was to grow. So if you acknowledge something that isn't right, this one will resonate with you, because you'll take stock of what's happening at the moment and question, right, am I happy with this, or does something need to change? And if something needs to change, then that then triggers the growth of whatever direction you need to go into. And the third one is to survive. And the reason why I added that one in was because when I was a teenager growing up, you know, I was in a very unfortunate situation where I was groomed by a family member. And it went on for 2 years, and I was absolutely terrified to ask for help, to to tell the truth of what was happening. So I went into survival mode. When that truth actually had to come out, I was frantic, because I was like, I am in danger. I am not going to come out of this well if it carries on. So I thought that, you know, without turning the talk into, you know, this is a was victim, now survivor story. I didn't want that. I wanted to put it into a more, you know, think about the aftermath of what you can do with truth. How is it going to affect other people? Who can you protect? Who can you empower to be more honest? So like your role as a parent, you know, empower your children to give them a safe space for honesty. Don't lambast them for telling the truth and then punish them for it. They need to be given an environment that they feel secure and confident that they can tell the truth.
Yeah,
So
I think it's really lovely that you found a way to turn it into something positive, right?
yeah,
The so one of the biggest things that I find, and we work with a lot of young people that tend to keep the truth hidden. Obviously, lots of different stories. One of the biggest things in that is fear.
Yeah.
So fear of what's happened to them.
Yeah.
How did you get over fear? How did you? Because I know people that still hide the truth.
It took me 40 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I was going with it,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
how did you get over that fear? And how, it's sort of two parts to the question. How do you struggle with? Did you struggle with relationships for a long time after that?
And I've got a third part to the question.
Oh,
If someone was listen, is it something that you have to do by yourself internally, or is there a way that someone can help you to do it, if that makes
yeah.
sense? Is it, you know?
Well, if we answer them in order, so fear, how you can overcome it, it's completely unique and personal to each and every person. You know, you can read books and you can listen to other people's stories, but it is your own journey of getting through that fear barrier. It's down to the environment that you're in. So what is your fallback safety network? So I knew deep down, when all of that was going on, that I could speak to my parents. I did. I've got a fantastic relationship with them, but I was afraid of the upset that it would cause in our family. That's where the fear was. But what drove the end result of telling the truth was because I actually feared for my life. I had no choice. I was backed into a corner, and you kind of you go through a stage where you think, right, this is option one, and this is what I foresee being the outcome of option one if I take this path. This is option two, and what happens if I take this path? Well, I chose option two of telling the truth because I needed help. And I thought, all I'm focused on at the moment is that I need help. I don't know what's going to happen as a result of this. I just know that I'm desperate for help.
Yeah.
And how old
And
were you?
I was 13. And then I think as you grow up, you know, every person goes through different chapters in life. You have different experiences, and you have opportunities to exercise how you combat that fear again. Again, we're not all the same. Everyone has their own personal journey. So there isn't a definitive textbook of when you're 16 you will get over fear. It's nothing like that. It's all down to your own personal experiences, your environments in which you thrive in, and your mindset. If you have a particular mindset that's resilient, you will survive anything. And given those opportunities where you can prove to yourself that you can survive whatever's thrown at you, it just compounds that extra weight of resilience that you will have within you. How it's changed the dynamic of my relationships growing up, it was, oh God, the most influential thing in my life that's attributed to the dynamic of the relationships that I have. So the big picture of my story is that once I did tell the truth, that family member committed suicide. So I've been almost, I can't even put it into words. So the fear of confrontation to me has been learned, that the risk of confrontation is that something tragic will happen. So that has put me in a very passive position as I've grown up, as I've got into different relationships. I've almost put myself in a passive realm, because if I avoid the confrontation, then I'll avoid anything that's catastrophic that will happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's not played in my favour over the years. You know, I'm now divorced because I got into a relationship that just wasn't great. So I'm at the age of 34 now, where I'm properly starting to accept that confrontation shouldn't be feared.
No.
And the risk of the worst case scenario happening is very, it's in a very low percentage realm.
Yeah.
And you have to assert yourself and what your needs are, because you will end up suffering if you don't do that. If you put yourself on a back burner, then you will end up suffering, and that's included in the TED Talk as well. But it wasn't linked directly to me. But the whole premise is, my own personal experiences. And what was your question, Rich?
Well, it was. I guess I didn't know. I was rushing to articulate it, but it was like, do you think that at that sort of age, there is a way, if you're a parent or a teacher, or that you can help a young person to come out and tell the difficult truth, or do you think that the reality is you need to have it within you and you need to deal with it yourself, even at a young age?
You need to feel safe.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's being believed and being. I guess, I mean, I've seen it in occasions where people aren't believed and people are, right? So it's being believed and feeling safe within an environment where you can talk about it. Guess what I was going to ask on that is, like, obviously that's happened to you and you've dealt with catastrophe straight away, right?
Mm-hmm.
You probably had mixed emotions at that time, right? Because there's a really tough thing to. Pardon?
Yeah, it was horrendous.
Yeah, and that's really difficult, because you've almost dealt with two. You've dealt with the truth of it, and then you've dealt with the suicide, and it's like, wow, like how was that for you and your family?
Yeah, so I mean, someone's chosen that route to take their own life. You look at it on paper, it's tragic. The emotions that go with that. You feel guilty because you're like, I've told the truth, and now this is what's happened as the result of me telling the truth. But then you also have to think, well, I didn't ask for that to happen. I didn't choose. That person's chosen. That person chose everything. They chose to behave the way that they did.
Yeah, of course.
And then they chose what their way out was. But then the human part of you, I remember going. Pardon?
It feels guilt.
It's awful, because I remember going to the funeral, and his parents were still alive. So you've got two parents that have then lost their child.
Yeah, that's what's going through my head at the moment.
Yeah.
Like you're there, you're angry, and there's anger, and there's people there who love him, and that's a really difficult thing to go through at such a young age.
It's just the ripples on the pond were so complex, and it's taken over 20 years to get to a situation where I'm like, okay, that guilt was misplaced.
Did it ruin relationships?
Yeah.
Yeah. How was trust after that? Like, trust obviously a big thing that you deal with, right, every day. So like, how was did you really struggle with trust?
Yeah. I went through desperation of wanting to feel safe in a relationship. It's desperation. That's the only way that you can describe it. But I just, I mean, even trust now, I'm getting better.
Yeah.
But it's always a factor of that you've got a wound there that still has time to heal. And there's different factors that happen in your life that then will put a different spotlight on it. So when I became a mom, when I had my first son, the guilt came round again in a different way. Like, I've got a son now. I couldn't imagine him dying before me.
Yeah. And then I suppose you become overly protective.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? It's like that. Listen, let's move on. First of all, thanks for sharing the story, and you've done so well, and well done. Like, it's incredible.
What I love about conversations like this is that even though they're so sort of serious and carry so much with them, I find them really inspiring, because obviously we'll now talk about some of the stuff that you've gone on to do, but you have gone on to do a lot. You are purposeful. You are helping tons of people. And it's that, I don't know, I find it really inspiring, people who have been through something so like deeply awful but can turn it into a positive.
Yeah.
That to me is like the most inspiring thing.
Yeah, and what the actual thing is although you're doing positive things now, right? But on the journey, you've also felt that guilt, so you've still battled through that, which is
Yeah.
incredible, because people could turn. What I want to go back to is something you mentioned in the TED Talks, because I was actually having a chat with Rich earlier. You said the best thing about that TED Talks was when you turned up and people wanted you to win, right? So me and Rich talk about it often. Like, there's not a lot of people in this world that want you to win,
Yeah.
right? So
true.
that really sat with me, because I was like, that's so lovely that you felt that. And actually, this community that we're building, and that all these podcasts that we're doing, and all these people that we're meeting, everybody wants everybody to win.
I love
it. And what I wanted to ask you is, like, how have you given that to your clients and people you work with? How do you instill that in them, of you wanting them to win?
Well, first and foremost, it's open and honest communication. It's by giving practical advice on how they can solve a particular problem, and you try and build their confidence. You're not there to just transact and go, right, okay, thank you. I'll invoice you after this session, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You want them to still remember what you've said to them, even after they've closed the doors for the day, and they're like, oh, right, okay, we can feel a sense of relief now. We've got the right support, and we know that we're gonna get this done. It's a bizarre world, coaching is, because although you're doing it and you're sharing knowledge and expertise, and you're trying to impart wisdom, you're still wanting to champion them as a person.
Yeah.
I talk about this all the time. What I certainly do lately is, it took me like 40 years to realize what the point of all of this was, and ultimately what my purpose is, which I feel is a very long time. But the reality is, I was doing it long before. I just hadn't really thought about it and articulated it. When did you realize that helping people to become better, very loose term, when did you realize that was your thing? Was there like a moment? Did it happen gradually? Like,
I wouldn't say it's one particular moment that comes to mind now. I worked at a company, years ago, was it now? Probably 5 years ago. And the team was very close. We were all growing together. But then life happens, to people at different stages. And I don't know why, but there was like a natural gravitation towards me with different issues and, thoughts that they had. And I would just give them the time. I would listen to them, but then I wouldn't let it go until I was satisfied that they felt better. And I felt better then. And that's when it started to, like, oh God, this is addictive. You don't want to listen to somebody being in pain, because you don't want people to be in pain. But the fact that you've given them the time, and that you can pass on a little bit of other, wisdom from your own life experiences, or start to say, have you thought about doing this? Or even just going back in a few days later to check in on them. The fact that you've made that difference, I felt that was just like, oh God, there's something here that's pulling me in a different direction. It's pulling me to feel better about what I'm doing, to be purposeful.
Can I ask you? You mentioned you're 34.
Yeah.
Have you ever had any problems with age? Because when you talk about consultancy and coaching and going in, and you probably work with people older than you, right? So I think there's a big perception around, you can only do consultancy when you've sold a business, or you can only do these things when you get to a certain point. And I always say that's rubbish. If you can give people knowledge, you can give people knowledge. However, have you had any barriers for how young you are?
Yes. That
how have you dealt with them?
And female, I imagine. Female and young.
A young blonde female, like, basically, like, who are you, love? Like, what can you possibly give to us? to get over that, I am honest with what I can do and what I can't do. So I will listen to what the challenges are in a business. I will look at how big the team is. If it's within a realm that I haven't done before, I will be honest and say probably won't be the right fit for you here.
Yeah.
But if I work with much smaller businesses, so teams of up to 50, in businesses that are turning over around about £1 million and they're starting to really feel the challenges of growth, I can help you because I've been there, and I can give you the practical advice and I can empathise, and it makes all the difference.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's a lot of people that could help and coach and consult that don't, because they're worried they're too young or they haven't sold their business. But I always think like sharing knowledge is so much better.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask that because it interests me. Like,
I've got a bit of a question. So, seeing as we're on the sort of the coaching vibe, what so my understanding is your focus, your niche is sort of people starting out. You're very much at the startup sort of phase. What do you think is the biggest fear that you see holding people back, and what's the answer to overcoming that?
They don't know how to. They've got this wonderful idea, but they just don't know how to get it started. Things like the business structure and formation. What does a sole trader mean? Is self-employment the same as sole tradership? A limited company? How the hell do you do that? So when they don't know and they're frightened of it, it stops them in their tracks. So if you can do a lot of hand holding with them, which is what people need, and it's great because that's where the value and the impact comes.
Yeah,
very rewarding.
It's funny, I was having a conversation with someone last night at dinner, and he wants to start his own business, and he said his big fear is winning enough business in the early days to pay enough for him to live. And I said, I promise you that is not the fear. If you're good at what you do, you'll be so surprised at how easy it is to go and pick clients up, and that's always the worry, but it's not the thing. I said the thing is chasing invoices, people not paying you. I said there's this shitstorm of admin and crap that you're going to have to overcome, understanding how to form a company, dealing with accountants. I said the day to day you'll nail, and it's just finding a way to navigate all of that stuff.
Yeah, but you don't know that's the problem until you've actually
done it,
gone into it yourself, do you?
Yeah,
of course not.
I meet so many people that want to start and they're just too scared to make that jump. And it's like what Rich was saying earlier. If you have that purpose and you have that drive to do it, you've just got to do it, right?
There's an ego that's there because nobody likes to say they've failed.
No.
So if somebody starts singing, "Oh, I've set up this new business, come and take a look," and then it's no longer there in 12 months, like that fear of like, "Oh God, if it falls in its arse, how's that going to make me look?" You have to just keep going, because the circle that you're in at the moment, people won't pay attention anyway.
No, that's what we were saying before this, weren't we? I mean, at the moment, my big thing is we're building a network, and I know I shouldn't think like this, but I've got this fear that no one turns up to our event. I've just got this fear. But I don't know. I don't know why it's in my head, because I know that this thing's going to be so powerful and brilliant, but it's just in the darkest corner of my brain telling me that no one's going to come to my first event.
Rich, I'll tell you the beautiful thing about us is we've got wives there that will tell us when we failed.
Ain't that the truth?
No, they also tell us when we're doing well, so it helps. But what would be the advice you'd give to your younger self? So you obviously give advice out now, right? But going back to when you were younger, and you've obviously had a lot of trauma that you've dealt with. You've helped a lot of people. Like, what advice would you give to yourself back then? And would you do anything differently?
So the advice that I would give is no one is coming to save you. That's it. Simple as that. Like, you are responsible for your own life. No one is coming to save you. You've got to do it yourself. And I don't. I mean, I wish that certain circumstances were different, but I'm very fortunate to have been given a very concentrated pockets of life experience, only for the age of 34.
Yeah,
I wouldn't change it, because there's a lot of there's a lot of demons that have been battled with, and there's a lot of challenges that have been overcome. There's lots of pockets of opportunities where I can reassure myself that life's good, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
I'm happy and comfortable with how things are.
I think I see it in you. Like there's a contentment, there's a drive, there's ambition, and like I always talk, and we talk a lot about trauma on all the podcasts, right? Because but I genuinely think I wouldn't be here if I hadn't had the trauma.
Yeah.
And it's shaped me, and it's made me strong, and it's put me in situations where I wouldn't have been able to deal with if I hadn't felt like that back then. Do you know what I mean? And
absolutely.
it's firstly, thank you for sharing your story. I mean, this is the first time we've met properly.
Yeah.
It's a hard subject to talk about, right? But we're really grateful that you have shared with us, and I know the amount of people who are listening will really resonate with what's gone on, and it will help some people, and that's what we're here for, right?
Yeah.
Can we? It'd be really good to find out what you're doing next, because this needs to be. It's what I know you're building some stuff. I know you've got some big plans. Like, share them with us. Where are we going with this journey?
So, to support startups on a wider scale, I've released a new Starting Thrive Up course on my website. So that's been something that I've been wanting to build for a while now. So that's live. That's available. It's a low cost course. It's £97 because I wanted to approach people who were desperate to get their idea off the ground but didn't have the resources to do so. So it's cost in a band that's not your stereotypical coaching price point. But the next steps for me is to launch the podcast, so the Thriving Startup Podcast, where we'll be talking to people that have started businesses and that have got overcome the challenges and can give advice of what they've overcome.
Be a guest on that.
And
You're
then
going to be 2 hours for us.
and then we need more good news in the world. I'd love to start something that's only focused on good news. That's it.
I love that. So we in one of our sites the other day, we started up like a like news of the week.
Yeah.
So like it's like, cool, we can be really negative over here.
Yeah.
But what's good? Like there's some good stuff going on. So like,
that's what this
interesting.
podcast is about, right? Good people doing good things. Like we're so sick of turning on the news. I mean, I don't watch the news, or opening a paper and it's just miserable. And don't get me wrong,
you don't read a paper either. Like, well, come on.
Go to the sports section, but you can't escape the fact that mainstream media is negative. It is. It seems to be what feeds the world, and there's some really serious things going on, but there's also a shitload of positivity, and it just never gets spoken about.
Yeah, it gets missed, and particularly with starting 2025, it's the most bizarre January I've ever experienced, because everyone's just very, very flat.
Yeah,
very flat. It's like it's more than the January blues.
Yeah,
and they need something else.
I don't like to talk about politics. I don't know enough about it, but there's definitely been a change in the last 6 months in the way people feel, and I've had to properly say to myself, like, 2025's the one. I'm not being negative this year. There's nothing that's going to stop me. But I think you're right. I see a lot of it around. I see a lot of people just struggling, like generally.
I don't think there are. I mean, you talk about politics, and I'm with you on that one. I don't have too much of an opinion. I don't like any of them, but I don't think they're doing anything to create positivity in this country at the moment. I think they are systematically ruining most things in this country, and I think people are finally almost feeling like they've given up. Like there isn't an awful lot to celebrate. There isn't an awful lot to be positive about, and I think we've got to be really strong as a nation and manufacture our own positivity and look at the good things.
And listen, I think if you look, I mean, just with both of you on this podcast, right? You're both creating amazing stuff. So you're creating what I do know is together everyone's going to be a lot stronger. So we've all got to get together, create a brilliant network of people, and we'll make things happen. Change needs to happen because we can't carry on like this.
We'd love you in our network, by the way. I think if you're interested, I think you could add so much value.
I'm very interested.
One of the, I was going to say that earlier, like we talk to so many people that like I said, have great ideas and great purpose and vision, don't know how to start up. You know, I'm sat there thinking, God, I wish I'd have had you 6 years ago, 7 years ago when I was starting. It would have made things so much easier.
Yeah.
Every time we leave a meeting speaking to someone of these people, Brian and I are like, right, we could do this. How can we help them? We could do this.
Yeah.
Be doing this. If I was that, I was doing this. And it's like, we can't do it for everyone, but if we've got enough people in the ecosystem, we probably can. It's the whole thing. It's the whole reason why we're doing it. So many good people out there that just don't have the toolkit to be able to actually do the thing.
Yes.
But they're not educated in it. Like I didn't know until I knew. Now it becomes like, I mean, we've started so many. It's like it becomes normal. But what I'm saying is, like, until you know something, you don't know how to do it. So I think it's really important. So we'll put all your tags and everything in there. Gemma will put all the tags and stuff in the bottom of the chat and the bio. I'm not very
tags, is it, Brian? You can tell Brian gets marketing.
Gemma,
do you mean links?
That's it. Yeah, we'll put all your links in. And thanks so much for coming on.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it, and good luck on your mission because it's a very purposeful one.
And to you.
Hopefully you're going to be on it with us.
Yeah, there's no way our paths aren't going to cross again. So really happy to have had you on.
Amazing.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.